What's up, everybody? Hope everyone's doing good. Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith, and I am joined by my brother, Chris Faga. How are you, sir?
What's going on, Dave? Thanks for having me on the show, man. People are already tweeting, are you going to have Sam Harris on? No, I am not Sam Harris. I am way more fun to have a beer with. I shut up sometimes.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, we'll see. Still waiting on that response from Sam Harris. We'll see. Well, I'm sure he'll take me up on my offer any minute now. Yeah, what a weird one. What a weird one Sam Harris is. It's also just kind of bizarre, like, as so many things in my life are. It's like just surreal that it's like, you're like, is Sam Harris coming at me? Like the guy that I watched when I was 20, you know what I mean? Remember when he used to get everything wrong? I was watching.
Yeah, I watched a lot of him. I watched Ben Affleck look like an idiot in front of him and Bill Maher. All of his big moments,
dude. And of course there was such a good counter argument to that. Oh God, I hated that it had to be Ben Affleck. Like it had to be the worst, like Hollywood liberal,
our nation's worst Batman.
Yes, the guy who could ruin a Batman movie.
Yeah,
that guy. Who, by the way, I'm really not a conspiracy theorist, but I do not believe wrote Good Will Hunting. Just saying.
How about them apples, Ben?
Yeah. Well, it just is. I don't believe that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote this masterpiece and then just made crap. Like as kids, they just stumbled into this great movie and then just made shit for the rest of their careers. So I don't buy it. But he's just like, of all the people to be countering Sam Harris, you get like a famous Hollywood actor going, "Wah, you're racist," and you're like, "That's the counter that you have." Whereas like there would have been, I remember I did an episode on it at the time, but I just didn't have an audience at the time. But I had a podcast. But it was like, no, the counter is like, he went on this whole thing where he was like, well, Muslims just want to kill everyone. And okay, sure, there's like 1.5 billion of them, and only like tens of thousands are actual jihadists. But then there's all these people who are sympathetic to the jihadists. And then there's all these people who want to live under Sharia law. And you just be like, yeah, okay, now let's do us.
Yeah.
There's 300 million Americans. There's only like really a few hundred neocons. Yeah, they wake up every single morning thinking about killing innocent Muslims. But then there's a bunch of people who will vote for the neocons or who will support them or who, whatever. Even the ones who say they're not neocons will staff their administration full of them. Like, I don't know. It's just like they always have to look at one side and not the other. And that's basically the game.
Well, I mean, that's just kind of what everybody does. This day you go like this, and then I remember when my main issue with Obama when he was running for president in 2008 was that, do you remember, this like went away immediately. He was kind of running on conscription, but not for the military, for like service.
Yeah, he floated that out. Yeah.
And people were talking about it. No, it was like a big part of his platform.
No, I remember. Yeah. No, I remember. It was before he got elected, but it was in his day where he was like, what if we, restored national participation by saying 2 years after high school, you have to go do something for military.
After 8 years of neocon Bush and Cheney shit, I was like, you really want, even if you like this guy, you really want to trust the next guy with whatever this indoctrination machine is? Like, it's a crazy thing.
Yeah, and it was and particularly I remember thinking, and because I guess I was naive or whatever, because hindsight's 2020, but through the Bush years, of course, as we're old enough to remember, there was like a real anti-war movement on the left, and there was a lot of like skepticism of like the Patriot Act and things like that. And I remember, during the Obama 8 years, it was like the anti-war left disappeared. But I remember when Trump first started looking like he was going to win the primary, being like, oh, well, maybe the best part of Donald Trump winning will be that the left might have to revisit some of these things and go like, oh, remember how Obama signed into law the right to detain U.S. citizens without charges? Well, we were okay with that under Obama, but now that Donald Trump has these powers, we should try to roll. But none of it happened. There's like a mix of like wokeism, and then CNN told him, oh, he's a Russian spy. And then any idea of having a critical thought just like went out the window.
And it's on both sides, though, because I remember I saw some right wingers. I know some right when like far right people, like who like when Biden got elected, they were like, I think we're all just going to end up in FEMA camps. I'm like, isn't it? And I literally went, isn't it just like government contracting? It always takes way longer than you think. And they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, we're supposed to be in FEMA camps under Obama and under Bush. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's always right. It's always like so ridiculous. And then of course, you know, all the people who like predicted FEMA camps for years, we kind of go back and look at their good predictions, and like they never really get scrutinized for that one. But you're like, yeah, I mean, you got that one pretty wrong. Sure. Listen, by the way, maybe we all end up in FEMA camps tomorrow. I'm just saying, like, at least as of now, that's a pretty serious prediction to make that doesn't come true.
I think so.
I'd say so.
Look, the frogs are gay, but we're not in FEMA camps. All right, you got one out.
No, they're trans.
Okay.
I'll give you 50%.
Either way, I sucked off a frog and he liked it. I don't know.
He was something. I'll
he
tell
was
you
wearing
that
lipstick.
He never told me what he identified as. Yeah. She identified as. My apologies. Don't mean to dead name frogs on this show. That's not what we're about. Oh, by the way, I should mention, of course, Chris, you have a brand new comedy special that you just put out. Tell people about that.
It's called Burn After Saying. I actually filmed it in the heart of libertarian country, New Hampshire, at the Shell, which is a libertarian clubhouse down there. Great audience. And here's it's super fun playing with audiences from place to place, because when I go on the road with you and Rob, I had some jokes that I could do very easily that slammed with your audiences. And then I had to come back to Brooklyn and be like, how can I rework this? And then they did. You just have to change things and add tags. And then it was because your audience knows me. I'd go back on the road sometimes and they'd be like, Chris, you're playing dumb. So now we're mad at you, but now I can get it. So then I had to rework it again. And then there was like a joke in there. When people say certain things you can't joke around on both sides of this, one of the biggest pops I got in there is a joke where I claim to be, where I'm like, I am pro-abortion. And it's one of the biggest pops in the whole half hour. And they were all on board. And this is an entire pro-life crowd. And they're all on board with it. And it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a very interesting thing when you do stand-up comedy. One of the things you realize is that like you could have like essentially the same joke and it's like not working. It's okay. And then you just find a little way to tweak it. So a different word in there. And then it's like murdering. And you're just like, oh, so that's all it took to give you people permission? Yeah, like it's almost like, oh, so now because I just tweaked this, now you have permission to laugh at the exact same idea. The exact same
inflection. It could be an inflection. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, that's weird. It's like, well, it's like I found the joke that made, you know, that joke about my brother being mentally handicapped that I tell. I don't tell as much as I used to, but so I found the tag that made that whole joke work. Sweating bullets, bombing my ass off at an audition for like Stand Up New York. And I just was like, look, I told my brother a joke. He laughs at everything. And that made everybody who was not on board with this joke about my brother being mentally handicapped laugh. And I was like, oh, you guys are okay with that. That part that I like, okay, all right.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. It's an interesting like window into social psychology or something like that, where you're like, oh, okay, I get it. So there's a dance where you have to be allowed to find this funny. There's something very interesting about that.
Well, all the Bushwick rooms and shit, which is funny. I always joke about it because I'm from here, and these gentrifiers look at me like I'm a Jersey transplant constantly. And when I do these hipster woke rooms, I have to do 3 minutes of clarification material that I understand that I look like a white guy bully every single big time. And it gets tiring, but like, I'm just like, I want to work on this next joke. So here's this joke I wrote 5 years ago that only works in your shitty rooms. Yeah.
I remember seeing like Shane had a lot of that, where it was almost like just who he isn't who the Brooklyn kids want to laugh at.
Yeah.
And so he'd have to have something kind of addressing that, and then kind of like, oh, okay, all right, he gets it, and he's funny. And then, but it is particularly funny in your case because, you know, as somebody who's 41, who's from Brooklyn, it really, like, no, you are Brooklyn.
Yeah,
I'm
a townie.
Kids, yeah, like these kids are the college kids, and you're the townie. That's right. It's like they're like, we don't want to hear that shit in our Brooklyn, and you're like, this is what it was built off of. Yeah. This is it. Do you guys not know? It is, you know, it's weird to me, because we're, you know, right around the same age and come from the same place. It's weird to me that when you just say the word Brooklyn now, like if you're just like, I'm from Brooklyn, what that conjures up in people's minds is like just light years away from what we would have imagined you would think. Like, I'd be like, look, there might be different things you could think. Like, you might be thinking like Biggie Smalls, or you might be thinking like some Guido in a wife beater, being like, hey, dude, take that over there, But it was all that. It was all that. And now it's like, oh, if I just say Brooklyn, you're thinking a hipster in skinny jeans with like a goofy hat pointed off to the side, who's like offended by a microaggression. Like, that's what Brooklyn conjures up now. What a weird world.
I was really hoping COVID would thin their herds, but it turns out they were lying about all those pre-existing conditions. They didn't actually have immuno diseases or whatever. Yeah, they just look sickly from eating ramen.
Turns out you were just a healthy, strapping young man in a dress.
Yeah.
You had no problems with you whatsoever. Dude, I remember during COVID, like at the height of it, people would be like, old New York is back. Because like New York got dangerous again.
Dude, for a little while. Like, I know, look, you had a baby. It was a different situation. Dude, Dave, I was out. Like, once they had tests, I had a few people die in my life, not of COVID. And I looked at my chick and I was like, I'm going outside now, right? Like, it's like, I'm getting, because she was like, we can like leave and go stay with my family. I was like, first of all, I'm from New York and my brother's here. I ain't going nowhere. That you could leave. And like, I just got real fucking street real quick. And then like all of a sudden they're having boxing matches in Washington Square Park and shit. I was like, this is fire.
All right, that part is pretty cool. Yeah. But when everyone would just say, oh, old New York is back, I'd be like, I don't know. I see a bunch of children scared of the cold. This doesn't seem like old New York to me. I mean, I understand the homeless people are more agitated than ever before, but like,
I did see a guy empty a colostomy bag in the middle of Union Square.
That is kind of old New York, I guess. New York, yeah, dude. That is, for better or for worse. Yeah. That's where we are. Well, speaking of emptying colostomy bags, there is.
Did somebody drain the swamp?
Well, almost. But this was, I don't know why, just so beautiful and kind of an amazing moment in American history. But Donald Trump was at the White House today. He might still be there. And he sat down with, believe it or not, a man who claims to be president of the United States of America. And here's their interaction. Let's play that, Natalie.
Make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So good. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And politics is tough. And it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today. And I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
All right, there it is, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Listen, you say what you will about that clip, but you got to be impressed with Biden's stamina. He was awake for the whole thing.
Donnie, I got gin.
I don't even know what to say about this moment, but one of the things that I find so beautiful about it is that it's so revealing how fake the whole thing is. Like it's just so incredibly fake. I mean, here was this guy who, up until he got cooed a couple months ago, was essentially making the argument that the democracy is over if this guy wins.
Yeah.
That this guy, I mean, he may himself have not called him Adolf Hitler, but certainly a lot of people around him did. And he said this was the end of democracy. But now, because the election's over, he's going to work as hard as he can to make it a smooth transition. Well, why would you do that? Why would you make it a smooth transition if democracy's over?
Yeah, exactly. It's also because it's never made. I had an argument with a guy we grew up with like 2 days ago, and I literally finally just had to say, dude, you can yell Hitler all you want. It's not making me believe he's Hitler. Yeah. Like, there's so many other things that you can say. And then like now we're arguing because I started arguing about all the checks and balances that would go on, the difference between Germany and like, it's like, okay, do we have the biggest military in the world, or are we rebuilding a military from scratch because we're not allowed to have one? Because that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge difference. Like, it's really hard to top down take over something like that without one of those guys finally going like, hey, how about one of us shoot this guy in the fucking head?
Yeah. Oh, look, I know people, by the way, I know people on right wingers too, who love to make this comparison. Someone asked me the other day at an event that I was at, they asked me, they're a big fan. And they asked me, they were like, what do you think of the comparison to current day United States of America and the Weimar Republic? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not saying there are no comparisons, but there's some pretty obvious differences that jump out at you. Like, America is, despite whatever problems we have, the world empire. Like, we run this shit. We are not the biggest losers of the biggest war that ever happened who are internationally humiliated and stripped of our sovereignty. And as you pointed out, your military. Now, is it like, it is true that they had like the, what's it called? I'm blanking on the freaking name, but they had like the cultural Marxists, and they had like some of these like kind of neo-communists who were pushing like transgenderism and some of the woke stuff. But you also have to mix that with hyperinflation and being internationally humiliated. And like, none of those characteristics are anywhere remotely close to 2024 USA. So it's just, okay, I mean, I guess you could talk about some aspects of things here or there. The Frankfurt School, by the way, I don't know why I was blanking on them, but like, it's just like the thing that jumps out at you quickly is like that. It's like, no, this is nowhere near the same situation.
No,
and well, it's like when they say, January 6th was an insurrection, and you're just kind of like, okay, but like, take me through this.
Well, the nebulous definition of insurrection is an organized attack on a government institution, right? It's just something very simple like that. It's essentially a riot that happens on government property is an insurrection.
Right.
Textbook, but it's not a coup. At the end of a coup, like when you attempt murder, right? At the end of the attempt, that person should have been murdered if you were successful. There was no way, and I know this has been litigated over and over again, but I literally had this argument with people when they use the word coup for that, and I go, okay, let's say they killed every single senator and Mike Pence. Would Donald Trump be the president? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then it's not a coup attempt. That's not what a coup attempt is.
Right. I mean, like, look, it's an insurrection if you're playing a bullshit semantics game. So like if you like this is one of the things I was arguing with your boy James Lindsay about.
That is technically my boy. I was the first one to ever interview him on a podcast. I let the genie out of the bottle.
You sure did. No, but he was doing this thing where basically the argument started because when I was on Tucker Carlson's show last time, or the time before, one of the times I was on Tucker Carlson, I just was saying how stupid it is to call Kamala Harris a communist. And how it's just like, I don't know. I was like, the attack doesn't land.
It is a Ugandan giant, though, Dave.
That I would never for a second argue with anyone on that. And that attack lands. You call her that, and all of a sudden I'm in. Yeah. And then we just got to find the Undertaker because she's deathly afraid.
Terrified.
But I was just like, look, first off, you sound like my grandpa when you call someone a communist. It doesn't resonate with anyone of this time. And second off, like, she's not a communist in any meaningful way. And then like James Lindsay's kind of like, he's like, no, you don't understand. You haven't read all my books. And actually, dang, they're all a bunch of Maoists and blah, 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 all this. And it's like,
I read all his books. He's still wrong.
Yeah.
I read all of his books.
First of all, and then like his big ace in the hole is that like Dang said something about how we're going to infiltrate the West. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't win you the argument. You have to actually demonstrate how, and no, it doesn't count that you have some campus radicals in the 60s who were influenced by Marx. It's like that, what? That doesn't mean the whole, and by the way, if she is a communist, like this is what I mean about the insurrection semantics game. It's like, okay, if she is a communist, then they're all communists. Then, but like if you're using, sure, if you want to say that DC, like that the U.S. federal government is fascist, you could make that argument. If you want to make the argument that they're communist, okay, you could make that argument. Sure, you have to be really loose with those terms, but you have to be so loose with those terms that they would describe Donald Trump now too. They would describe Barack Obama and John McCain and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and this whole system. So again, it loses all its value as an attack. Likewise, if you want to say January 6th was an insurrection, okay, but then the Black Lives Matter riots had like 4 or 5 insurrections, and also the protest while Trump was in office had an insurrection, and also I think the Free Palestine people had an insurrection under Joe Biden. So either we're calling all of this insurrection, which is stupid, or we're calling just this one thing an insurrection, which is dishonest. And so they just want to talk about the one thing and then say it technically meets the definition. It's just, all of it's incredibly weak.
You want to hear a funny way to argue with people about that?
Sure.
You go like this. There were 10,000 people in Washington, D.C. on January 6th to protest the election, right?
Mm-hmm.
Less than 2,000 entered the Capitol building. That seems like that would be a mostly peaceful protest, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a great way to do it.
By definition of the word mostly, meaning more than 51%.
And it's even more than that, because of those 2,000 people who entered, like only a handful of them entered violently. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know exactly the percentages, but we have on videotape cops pulling barricades aside. We have cops guiding people around through the building. And so all of those people, at least, you can't even really claim that they, I'm sorry, but it is the only reasonable that for any citizen, if a cop guides you somewhere, it is reasonable for you to assume I'm legally allowed to be here. Like, sure. I don't know, if I'm in any situation and the cop goes, hey, this road's closed, but you can go down this street. And then I go down that street and then someone goes, you're under arrest for going down that street. That's just not right. I'm like, no, but the guy with the badge and a gun said this was the legal option. So you take all of those people out and now you've got, a handful of people who broke some windows.
Yeah.
This is just, and again, to your broader point, which is really the most important point there, is that, as I always said to everyone, like the same thing you were saying. It's like, okay, so step one is Donald Trump saying, go peacefully protest in this area. Step 85 is Donald Trump is now installed again for a second term, even though he lost the election. Help me flush this out a little bit.
Yeah, where do we
help me flush this out? Like let's say they get their hands on Mike Pence. They stop the certification of the ballots. Okay, now what's next?
Yeah,
because like it's so quick before you just go like you don't even make it to the National Guard. You never even get to the National Guard. There's no conceivable pathway there. DC Metro Police swarm the place and take these guys out. But let's just say you fight off you fight off the Capitol Police. Then you got to deal with DC Police. Then you got to deal with the National Guard. You're going to take them out. Like the final step here is the military is deployed. You know what I'm saying? Like, take me through the scenario where Donald Trump is installed as president.
Cells. We would know if there were sleeper cells around the country to continue this. That's how a coup works.
Right.
Like,
it's all so ridiculous. All right, guys, let's take a quick moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, one of our newest sponsors, which is Native Hydrate, a zero-sugar electrolyte and amino acid drink mix that supports hydrogen, energy, and muscle health. Native Path's Native Hydrate is a thoughtfully designed formula packed with electrolytes, branched chain amino acids, and all 9 essential amino acids to help with muscle recovery, bladder health, and overall vitality. Plus, it's free of sugar, artificial additives, and third-party tested for purity. With Native Hydrate, you can fuel your body with essential electrolytes for cellular hydration and the amino acids it needs to absorb and retain those vital minerals. Unlike other hydration drink mixes, Native Hydrate contains just 230 milligrams of sodium for optimal daily hydration. Native Hydrate is only 5 calories per serving. Every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it absolutely risk-free. Check them out at nativehydrate.com/part-of-the-problem to see what Native Hydrate could do for your health. That's nativehydrate.com/part-of-the-problem, and make sure to use the promo code part of the problem. All right, let's get back into the show. But I do think just this moment with Biden, and Trump kind of says it there, where he goes, politics is an ugly business, but everything's like nice today. But it's almost like what he's saying and what Joe Biden is kind of conceding here is that like, yeah, we made all this shit up. I don't know. It was an election. So we thought, we didn't really have anything to motivate people.
It was a debate.
Yeah, it's that. It's like, oh, okay. And they've all kind of like revealed this, like, and look, we all know that obviously during any election, yeah, people are going to bullshit. They're not going to be 100% truthful. They're going to try to damage their opponent. But it does really say something about like how unhinged the leadership in our country is. And I think you see this filter down to regular people, that it's like, like the comment you made that in the debate thing, that was about calling Joe Biden a bigot. Yeah. She called him a racist at their first debate, and then is happy to take his VP slot, and then is happy to take his endorsement for president. And it's the same thing here. It's like, oh, but you'll actually, I understand you're just trying to work people up, but there is, and I'm never one of the people who's like tone policing, but there certainly is something where everybody from all the halls of power are saying democracy's over. And then this guy wins, and now you have regular people freaking out because they think democracy's over. It's truly dangerous. For all those people you talk about, like our old friends who you argue with, or just any like liberal friend of yours who you may know who you've argued with, like it does, yes, they're being insane, but they get to sit there and say like, well, I just listened to the President of the United States and the head of the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA director all tell me the same thing. And so, like, it's like they're given permission in a way to be mentally ill that is not helpful.
Well, it's like I said this to you the other day when we were at the comedy club, though. It's like people were talking to me about why all these people joined up with Trump. Your Tulsi, Elon, even Rogan or in RFK, and it's like, well, let's look what the Democratic machine has done to all of these people in the last 5 years. Even more, Tulsi got called by the most powerful Democrat in the country a Russian asset while she was still in the military, and nothing happened.
Well, imagine,
there was
and
no
by the way,
repercussions.
just to because I want you to continue on this, but just to go down that, Tulsi, Hillary Clinton voted for the war in Iraq. Tulsi went there.
Yeah,
she served. She
stitched people up in the war that you started.
The war that you voted for, which you now admit was a mistake.
Yeah,
she went there, and she's not. I think technically she's not a combat veteran, but she was in a medical unit in Iraq during the height of the fighting. Like someone who really saw the costs of war up close and personal.
I mean, you can argue more so. You can argue that somebody working in a medical unit sees the cost of war significantly more than somebody. You can make that argument. I've never been in combat, but you can obviously make the argument. Those guys get downtime. All you're doing is stitching up the people getting blown apart.
Yes, it's really a brutal job where you're very firsthand seat for the actual consequences of this war. And so you're telling me the person who voted for this war based off lies, and then you have the person who went there and said, sir, yes, sir, I will go make this sacrifice for my country. And then person A turns around and calls that person a traitor? Yeah. Like, who's the fucking
national television?
Yeah.
National television, zero repercussions. I believe Tulsi was still technically in the National Guard, wasn't she?
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, like,
she was active duty. Yes.
Like, this is insane to do this. And then it's like, then you got RFK. He met the metrics for Secret Service protection. And then they used semantics to deny it to him. His father got shot in the head running for president. I wonder why he signed up with the other side. Rogan, literally, we know all the stuff, the lies on Rogan. I don't have to tell your audience what that is. But like, look at these people over and over again. And you're wondering like why they have gone to this other thing. It's like, because you're f***ing them over. You're lucky Bernie Sanders isn't hanging out with Donald Trump. Like,
no, that's right. That's right. And ultimately, because Bernie Sanders doesn't actually have the stones to stand up to anything, which has been a characteristic of his entire career. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm just really happy, even despite not liking some of these appointments. I'm so happy that Kamala Harris lost. Like, she just needed to lose. And you think about it, as the whole corporate media is going like, oh, I guess we need our own Joe Rogan now. Like, they just figured out that he has the biggest show. It's like, yeah, he was a Bernie supporter, and then you guys tried to ruin him. You tried to like go. You tried to like humiliate him nationally, and he's just better at this than you. And so he jujitsu'd you up and made you all look terrible. But like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you lost him. Hey, maybe that wasn't a wise move. Maybe you don't go, hey, you see the most influential man in the United States of America? We're going to make an example out of him. Yeah. All right. Well, you failed, and now look what you get.
It would be like if they called Walter Cronkite Yella.
Yeah, so yeah, that's right. No, but I mean, I know personally, and I'm not saying like I have some inside information anyone else doesn't. Everybody watched it play out. But yeah, no question, like he took that personally. And that had an effect on him, that it was like, oh, yo, CNN is lying about me and blatantly lying.
They're still lying. So you think, all right, the lies have stopped working, but then it does. Like, this is the headline. I was just talking about the show. World's 10 richest people got a record $64 billion richer from Trump's reelection. It's not from Trump's reelection. The stock market hit an all-time high, as it did 3 months earlier when this same headline would have read, the stock market hits all-time high. Why would you vote for Donald Trump? Yeah. We're not fucking stupid. Stop thinking the average American is fucking stupid. They didn't need you to parade out stupid Tim Walz. You should have got Josh Shapiro, and you might have won Pennsylvania. The guy actually did stuff for working class people there by eliminating that college education requirement for 90% of state jobs. You put that guy up there, and what were you worried? You were worried he was a Jew? That was the thing you were worried about. The party that's not racist is worried this guy's what is it?
Well, I think honestly, it's they were worried that he would outshine her. I mean,
he's a better speaker. He's a significantly better speaker.
I think that's a big part of it, and that he has ambitions and stuff like that. But yeah, dude, I mean, we were talking about this in the green room out in Philly the other day, but it's almost like they were just incapable of adjusting to the facts on the ground. And that's particularly devastating when there's been basically a revolution in this industry. And so, it's like, somebody is like in 1780, they're just like, I have a plan to get us away from the British. And you're like, oh, you didn't hear? Yeah, like there's been a revolution. Yeah. We're not a colony of the Brits anymore. You know what I mean? Like it's like they just can't like adjust. And so you'd have this dynamic where, as you watch, all the time. I mean, I see, especially since I just did Rogan, this is always the case in the days after you do Rogan, there'll be like these clips that are like going by, but you'll see just like a clip that I'm not even tagged in, but I just like found it like on Twitter because someone tags me on it, of me with 3 million views on it, because it was just a clip of the Rogan experience. And then this went viral in some other little world. And so what happens is when you have something like, just for example, Tony Hinchcliffe doing what any American, was literally anybody who watches that video, it's not,
or this is, just been to Washington Heights.
Yeah, right, or something like that. But immediately this is a country that grew up on Don Rickles. What you're watching. There's no there's no confusion about what's going on here, right? But then the Tony clips, and they're shared so many different times, and like this version has 3 million, this version has 15 million, this version has 7 million, this version only has 600,000, but then this one has another 3 million. It's like the clip is viewed so much. The numbers are so high on this side, and the numbers for the corporate media are so down here that when people in the corporate media, they haven't even adjusted for the fact that so many people who watch CNN's take on that also watch the video. And they're like looking at the video just like, oh, you're lying to me. You're saying speaker at Trump rally said Puerto Ricans are garbage. But what I see is a roast comic just machine gun spraying everybody. And like the Puerto Ricans got one shot, the Jews got one, the Muslims got one, his mother got one, and you're just like, oh, they didn't adjust to the fact that people don't like suspect they're lying. Mm-hmm. They can watch that you're lying to me.
Always lying.
This is not what happened. He didn't say very fine people on both sides. He didn't have a Nazi rally. Tony Hinchcliffe is a comedian. Like there's so many like that. And again, they tried to tell us Joe Biden wasn't senile. Like, dude, it's just insane.
I think what the main thing, this must have sunk Kamala so badly when she goes, when they asked her, I think it was on The View, they asked her, what would you have done differently in the last 4 years? And she was like, nothing I can think of. It's like, well, now we know you're lying. I guarantee you, I have never met a vice president of the United States, but there is no way that every single vice president has been sitting down the hall going, man, if I was that motherfucker, you know what I would be fucking doing? That we'd be running this whole fucking, that's what everybody does to their direct boss all the time.
Imagine just sitting there every day, just going, nailed it again, Joe. Yep. Perfect. Wouldn't have changed a thing. Well, it's also what was remarkable about it was, and you know, part of it is that, and this is ultimately why she didn't do Rogan, and this is why she didn't do more interviews and things like that, is that she was so guarded. She was always so worried that you would like figure out what she was really about. And I think partially because she's not really about anything other than getting power. But it was, look, this was, that question really damaged her. And it was in the most friendly atmosphere that was designed to get her over and was one of the most predictable questions. I mean, like, if me and you were sitting down here and we just worked for a campaign or something like that, and you were like, right away, I go, hey, here's the only information I'm going to give you just to start with your campaign. Your candidate is the sitting vice president of a unpopular one-term administration, and he's pulled out of the running, and now she's going to run for president. Right away, within the first 5 minutes of us brainstorming, we'd be like, well, we better have an answer to this question.
It's as simple as this. I would have had more planes to fly people out of Afghanistan. That's it. Would have moved on. You wouldn't have had to mention the economy, which was very bad on them. You take an issue that everybody agrees, like me and you both agree we should have left Afghanistan, but that was bad. And it's still probably for the best that we left, right? Like I think we both agree with that.
Sure.
But if you just, so you appease even the two of us who don't like you, and agree that we should be gone, but that was a mess. You just go, we should have had more people on the ground ready to transport our allies in Afghanistan out of Afghanistan so that they were not in fear of their lives by the Taliban. Very simple. One thing, everybody remembers those images. And I just, by the way, didn't have that coming in here, just thought of that.
Yeah, and it's better than what she said. Yeah. I mean, like, it's and I'm telling you, if me and you had 20 minutes to brainstorm about this, we had come up with like an excellent answer to that question. It's like, it's just, you know, so, right, there's, you know, she essentially just deserved to lose. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Sheath Underwear, the greatest underwear on the face of the planet, and also just a fantastic company that's been a longtime sponsor of this show. Been many years now that they've been supporting our show, and they make an unbelievable product. It is the only boxer briefs I ever wear. Their moisture wicking technology creates the underwear of legends. Honestly, get one pair and put them on. You're going to see what I'm talking about. Make sure you support the people who support us, and while you're at it, get the best pair of underwear you will ever own. Right now, go to sheathunderwear.com and use the promo code problem20 for 20% off your entire order. That's sheathunderwear.com, promo code problem20 for 20% off. All right, let's get back into the show. By the way, did you hear Nancy Pelosi on the New York Times podcast?
No, I would love to.
So I've never listened to this podcast before. I
hate her. There's very few people I hate more viscerally than Nancy Pelosi. Well,
so she essentially, we had been speculating about this. I think it was something when Manafort was on Tucker Carlson. I thought he said something about this, but there had been, there was a lot of speculation about what exactly happened with Joe Biden because the timeline was so shady. And he didn't come out and address the nation until days after that letter had been posted. It was a very strange way for a president.
He got syphilis in a nursing home. That's, I think, what happened to his brain, at least.
It's quite possible. But it's just very bizarre. The whole thing was very bizarre that a sitting president announces he's not seeking re-election after swearing that he was. A couple weeks before the convention, he's pulling out, and that wouldn't warrant a national address to the American people. That it would, that's very bizarre already. I don't get whatever excuses you give me about COVID or syphilis. That's very shady. But so I remember Mark Halperin. So on Friday, he ended up pulling out of the race on the Sunday. And on the Friday beforehand, even though Biden was saying, the George Clooney piece had already been written, and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi had already met with Joe Biden, and they were already freezing like hundreds of millions of dollars. The donors were pulling out because they wanted a new candidate after the debate, the disastrous debate performance. So Mark Halperin reports on Friday that his sources in the White House are telling him that Joe Biden is going to pull out this weekend, the letter is already being drafted, and that he's going to throw it to an open primary, and they're going to have a contested, convention. And so at the time when he reports this, Joe Biden is still saying he's in the race. Up till Sunday, on the Sunday morning shows, Joe Biden's surrogates are going out and saying, why are we even still talking about this? Joe Biden's in the race. He's made it clear. He's the candidate. We beat him last time. We're going to beat him again this time. A couple hours later, this letter comes out. Now, this right away gave a lot of credibility to Mark Halperin's reporting, because not only did he predict that he'd be out this weekend, but he said the letter is being drafted. He predicted the way in which he would pull out of it, that it was going to be a letter. And so it was all of that.
Do you think Jill Biden held his hand while he pointed at the letters?
Oh, who the hell knows? I don't believe he wrote it. I'm not even sure he was aware of any of this. I don't know if so what's interesting about this, right, is that in the letter, like, the only part of Mark Halperin's reporting that was wrong was that he did end up endorsing Kamala Harris. But interestingly enough, not in that letter. It wasn't in that letter. And it was like 30 minutes later, he sent a tweet, or someone sent a tweet from Joe Biden's account that said, I fully endorse Kamala Harris. And what they're saying now is that this was his middle finger to all of them. That he's like, oh, you're going to push me out, fine. But I'm going to saddle you with the worst candidate who can't possibly beat Donald Trump. Now, the other thing that is interesting that's come out since then is that evidently they knew how bad this thing was going to go.
But she beat Trump in that debate. She won the debate. They just couldn't capitalize.
He did a terrible job in the debate. He had a very, very bad night. And it, it was close enough, but close is a win for her. So like, I'd agree with you that, like, yeah, that was her night. She was the winner of that night. But evidently, before Joe Biden dropped out, their internal polling, which is kind of interesting to see how much better their internal polling is than the polls that the rest of us have access to. Okay. But their internal polling had Donald Trump winning 400 electoral votes. Like, they knew that not only did they know, so she actually did better than what their internal polling was saying. And I think that kind of makes sense. For all her flaws as a candidate, you look at Joe Biden and you're like, dude, you just can't run this. This isn't a functioning adult human being. Yeah. But it does show you something that even in the face of that, he didn't want to pull out. And so they're blaming him. I mean, really, they all deserve blame. Like, Nancy Pelosi's trying to throw him under the bus, but they all deserve blame, because it's like, you all pretended.
What did Pelosi say? What was her exact words?
I'd have to go back and pull it up to her exact words, but she was basically saying that, like, he should have done the right thing earlier. He should have dropped out of the race and given her more time. And the problem is that you guys all should have allowed for a real primary to happen. You all shouldn't have fucking gaslit the whole country about how he wasn't senile and he was sharp as a tack behind closed doors. So it's like, it's on all of you.
There was a primary happening, right? You had three candidates running in a primary against Joe Biden. You had Marianne Williamson. You had RFK. What was the guy's name? Dean. I always go to say Dean Edwards, but that's the psychic, right?
Dean Edwards is a comedian.
There's a comedian, but he was also the psychic from back in the day.
Okay. No, I know who you're talking about.
Dean Phillips.
That's right. That's right.
So it's like, you had a primary. It's like, well, you had it ready to go. You kiboshed the primary to prop up Biden. But who knows? Look, dude, I have the feeling that, like, this was kind of, maybe they would have picked somebody that wasn't Kamala, and maybe his tweet did that. But, like, I think it was always the plan to not have a primary and just appoint somebody new at the convention, because that's the old way. Like, national primaries have only existed for less than 100 years, right?
Right.
So it's like, I think they were going to always do that, but I think Trump getting shot sped it up.
Yeah, well, that was when Biden really had to get out, because he had there's okay. So here's Nancy Pelosi's exact quote. She said, "Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race."
There was three.
The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary.
There was.
And
He
as
stopped
I
it.
say, Kamala may have, I think she would have done well in that and been stronger going forward. But we don't know that that didn't happen. So throwing both Biden and Kamala Harris under the bus after this loss, just really classy move by Nancy Pelosi.
I mean, rockin' tits, though.
She can't, you know what? Can't sue you for slander on that one. Yeah, it really is just something. By the way, in other news from the election fallout, and I really particularly loved this, we got what we were all looking for coming out of this big election day, which was an update on the future of Don Lemon. We were all very concerned about what he would do. How do we process all of this information? Where can we find Don Lemon's opinion? Is the question I want answers to, and I finally got them from the horse's mouth. Here is Don Lemon.
Hi, everyone. I have loved connecting with all of you on Twitter and then on X for all of these years, but it's time for me to leave the platform. I once believed that it was a place for honest debate and discussion, transparency and free speech, but I now feel it does not serve that purpose. In addition, starting this Friday, November 15th, X is implementing new terms of service, which, among other things, states that, quote, all disputes be brought exclusively in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas or state courts located in Tarrant County, Texas, end quote. The full terms of service can be found on my written statement or on the X website. Now, as the Washington Post recently reported on X's decision to change the terms, this, quote, ensures that such lawsuits will be heard in courthouses that are a hub for conservatives, which experts say could make it easier for X to shield itself from litigation and punish critics. I think that speaks for itself. You can find me on YouTube at The Don Lemon Show, or on TikTok and Facebook at Don Lemon, and on Instagram and Blue Sky at Don Lemon Official. I hope you will join me there.
And on Grindr as Dirty Lemonade Golden Showers.
We will not be joining you there, Don Lemon.
No.
We will not. I think it's interesting for several reasons. Number one, like, oh yeah, they want to, what a scandal that Twitter would rather be in a legal jurisdiction where they can, quote, shield themselves from liability. Like, yes. In other words, that where the state can't crack down on them for not censoring speech.
They're also based in Texas. It would make sense that they would want to litigate their things in Texas where they live.
100%.
Yeah.
It's also, but like you can see what's really going on here is that, yeah, like, you know, for all the people who said that Twitter isn't real life, you know, that was always like the slogan, is like, which is, it is and it isn't.
It's
But-
the least real life of the platforms. Doesn't mean it's not real life. The internet is real life now.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, you know what's really not real life is CNN.
Oh, yeah.
CNN isn't real life. And so Don Lemon now comes out into the Wild West after he gets canned from CNN, and he notices, like, he can't post anything without being ratioed and just everyone telling him how much we hate him. And so he's going to retreat back to an area where the conversation is controlled, or at least more controlled than it is here. But I do think, at least as of right now, I think the most interesting thing about this moment and Trump's reelection is that the state propaganda apparatus has been shattered. And that the fact that Donald Trump could be launched into the White House by Rogan and Theo Vaughn and Patrick Bet-David and all these guys, there's this new landscape. And, you know, while they're asking the question over at CNN and MSNBC of like, well, how do we build our own Joe Rogan? Because that's really what they want to do. You kind of notice that it's like, look,
You get Trump to make cloning legal in this country. That's that's the first thing.
yeah, I mean, you might need that. I mean, look, I love the examples of, so you have on one hand, you have Tucker Carlson, and then you have Don Lemon. I believe they were fired on the same day. I could be wrong about that, but
it was within the same week.
it was, I think it was the same day. Go double check me on that. But so you have, Don, and then you just watch Tucker go into this world and thrive. become bigger than he ever was at Fox News. And then you watch Don Lemon go from CNN into this world and just die 1,000 Don Lemon deaths. And part of the thing here, which I find so interesting, is that it's like, look, however you feel about Tucker Carlson, I happen to love the guy, but whatever opinions people have about him, people have strong opinions one way or the other.
He should close his mouth.
Yeah,
I know that's your friend. I know that's your friend. I wish he would close his mouth.
I'll get the message to him. But
Okay,
the
please.
point is that he has something to say.
Yes.
Whether you agree or not, he's got something to say. I happen to think a lot of it is really great. Don Lemon has nothing to say.
Don
That's
Lemon is a
essentially
drug
the
addict.
problem. Yeah, well,
The drug is being at CNN. Like,
Yes.
you get what I mean? Like, it's
Yes.
like, oh, they were both filed April 2023.
yeah.
He had an audience with the richest man in the world who just gave him a bunch of money to move to his platform, and he was so addicted to just being in that seat of power at CNN that he just was like, I'm just going to shank this on purpose. Like,
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just an addiction. It's an addiction.
Yes, no, I think that's right. The thing, though, is that in this new landscape, there is, and look, this is only the first step. There's a lot more that needs to happen. But at the very least, you have to have something. You've got to have something somewhat unique or original, a point of view. You know, your interview with Elon Musk, it's like, oh, you're against DEI, so you must be racist. Like, that's just not going to cut it around here.
Yeah,
you just
not
got to
working.
have something better than that. You realize, and it's a function, I think, of monopoly, essentially, that you realize you just, like, the atrophy in the service that you provide is so incredible because you've never had to work for it. You haven't had to compete with anybody. Your ratings are artificially boosted by airport television stations and you're just there saying nothing.
Bar airports.
Yeah, literally. And so it's like they're not even on at the airports anymore.
No.
There's too many
It's
people
all
who must have been
ESPN.
complaining.
Yeah.
They're like, just put on the game, dude. I
Any
want to watch
game,
something
I don't
real.
care. Competitive
Yeah.
tag. I don't
Yeah.
care. Whatever's on ESPN. Let's go.
100%.
Here's the thing. You would have had a liberal Joe Rogan if you didn't call him a transphobe for disagreeing with you on the thing he's the most an expert in.
Yeah. Well, think about that too, man. The fact that first he started getting, like, literally Joe Rogan. I mean, you can't even make this up for people who don't remember it. Joe Rogan never, when it first started at least, he didn't come out against trans people or against anything. He said, hey, there's a biological man cage fighting women, beating the shit out of women. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's, like, fought my entire life, this is wrong. Men shouldn't get to go beat up women. And that's fine that like this guy identifies as a woman now, but I'm telling you, the bone structure of a man and the advantages that you have by biologically being a man to fight a woman is not right. And
to be fair, he also didn't say she shouldn't be able to fight women. He just had to disclose it.
Yes,
because
well, that was the other thing.
Durandamy
Right.
beat the shit out of this trans lady, right? Jermaine
Yes.
Durandamy.
Now what Rogan was saying after that was then everyone was like, see, that's proof that, like, a woman could beat this man. And Rogan had an excellent point. He was like, no, that's proof that this trans woman isn't even good. She's not even like a good fighter. She was only winning these fights because he's a biological man fighting women. And again, look, the argument is so overwhelming on this that men shouldn't fight women. It's, first of all, it is completely common sense to everyone, but then you just go
we
like,
were all told as children.
well, look, why?
You know how many times I would have loved to just fucking put one right in their suck hole?
Turns out you're not allowed to.
Yeah.
I got the memo a little late, but you're not supposed to. It's frowned upon. Yes. But it's like, look, why is it that, let's say, why is it that men don't fight women in the UFC? Forget the trans question. Just saying, why is there a men's division and a women's division? Okay, it's because we all recognize that there is something unfair about men fighting women. And what is that that's unfair? Is that how those men feel about themselves, or is it biology? Like, obviously it's biology, right? It's not we're not keeping John Jones out of the female division because of how he identifies. We're keeping him out of there because of what he is, objectively.
Popping for coke.
Yeah, well, that's
Dude, I'm not going to believe that fight's happening on Saturday until they touch gloves. I refuse.
Well, it better be happening. That's all I'll say. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Qualia Senolytic. Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. Your life goals in your career and beyond require productivity, but let's be honest, the aging process is not our friend when it comes to endless energy and productivity. That's why you gotta check out Qualia Senolytic. As we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their body. Senescent cells cause symptoms of aging such as aches and discomforts, slow workout recoveries, sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-age feeling. Also known as zombie cells, they are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they're taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like pruning the yellowing and dead leaves off a plant, Qualia Senolytic removes those worn-out senescent cells and allows the rest of them to thrive in the body. Take it just 2 days a month. The formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement each other, factoring in the combined effect of all ingredients together. Plus, they have a 100-day money-back guarantee. Resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia Senolytic. Go to qualialife.com/problem for up to 50% off and use the promo code PROBLEM at checkout for an additional 15% off. For your convenience, Qualia Senolytic is also available at select GNC locations. That's QUALIA life.com/problem for an extra 15% off your purchase. And a big thank you to Qualia for supporting today's episode. Let's get back into it. Yeah, that's, but you know what I mean? So he says this, and then these, what I can only describe, like these, I get people, I don't hate, and I don't, but there's like these mentally ill 20-somethings at Spotify who got all up in arms over Rogan about that, and then the entire regime sides with them. They side with them. They don't go, oh, listen, Joe Rogan here is making a very reasonable point about an area that he has legit expertise in, and he should be allowed to make this very obviously correct point. Yeah. You know, like, it's not, this isn't even like something like, you know, you have a swimmer who's born a man but identifies as a woman and is breaking all of the girls' swimming records. However you might feel about that, and I think there's a reasonable argument that those girls have, that it's like, hey, you just like, this is not right. But we're talking about cage fighting here. Mm-hmm. You're not talking about, like, you know, cage fighting is a sport where in general everyone's taking their health in their risk, they're taking their health in their, you know, hands.
Well,
and hands. Yeah, right, or other people's hands. But like, to have a man fight, like striking a woman with everything he's got is just wrong. No, yeah. And so anyway, it's all just it. So yeah, there's a lot of different lessons like this, but it's just like, yeah, that's here. The reason why you can't create your own Joe Rogan is because no one could be Joe Rogan arguing for this shit.
Well, it's just, if you can't have a dissenting opinion, you can't be an iconoclast.
Right. Like, and if you're not even trying, you know, if you're not even trying to have a thoughtful opinion, you know, when the one big podcast, I guess that Kamala Harris did was the Call Her Daddy podcast.
I watched none of it. I watched a little bit of her on Shannon Sharp, and I was like, I can't with this. He's not a great interviewer. Kat was great on there, so I was like, maybe this will be good. Yeah, but it just wasn't very good.
I saw clips of both, but also then you realize like the numbers just didn't do good. You know, like her Call Her Daddy last I checked had like 700,000 views or something like that.
Sharp had, I think it was, when I checked, it was like maybe a couple of weeks ago, it was like 1.4, but Kat was still at like 80 million.
Yeah, but still, even think about that. Donald Trump is over 100 million with Rogan. Yeah. I don't know what his numbers are.
And that's when you couldn't find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's without like, when I went to find it on YouTube the next day, or like maybe it was later that day, I had to like type the entire thing and then go down. It was not the first result.
No, I mean, I know for a fact that the numbers between YouTube, Twitter, and Spotify were well north of 100 million. And part of it is just because like Donald Trump was talking. He was having a real conversation. Kamala Harris went to all of these stops and attempted to just do what she does. The big clip that I think we played on this show and then like responded to was her. It's like the Call Her Daddy chick is like, now, you know, Roe v. Wade got struck down. Madam Vice President, can you think of any laws that control a man's body? And they're just like,
I can
you
name
know,
50.
I can't. And it's like, that, right. I mean, that's what we did on the show, is just name all of the, all of them.
Yeah,
every one of them. Like every law, essentially.
Selective service, that's the first one.
Yeah, well, that's the pretty obvious one.
Yeah.
Drug laws, the
Any
income
drug law,
tax.
yeah.
I mean, there's like a million different things. But like, you know, I don't know. It's all just so
You can't drink unpasteurized milk.
I mean, yeah, really, legitimately, there are so many freaking laws that control men and women's bodies. So first off, it's a stupid point. But second off, it's just the most shallow, basic, dumb talking point thing. And like, whatever you say about the podcast world compared to like the corporate media world, that's not what we're looking for over here. You need to do a little bit better than the most shallow talking point and then pretending like you've said something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, dude, listen, I do have to wrap up because I got another show to run right to. But tell people again where they can find your comedy special or anything else you're promoting.
So, I mean, just the comedy special is the main thing. You can definitely find it on YouTube. I've heard from a couple of people that you have to type the whole thing in. But it's Chris Faga, Burn After Saying. It's a half hour. Like I said, I filmed it down in New Hampshire with all those libertarian savages. And then you can also find me at Chris from BKLYN on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll be retweeting it all week. Please go check that out.
We'll
Really
put the we'll put the link to it in the description for the episode, so people can go right there.
Great, fantastic.
And get it. All right, Chris, you're the man, dude. Great talking with you as always, and thanks
Dave.
everybody for listening. Catch you next time. Peace.